She looked at his worn-out hoodie and saw a thug. She looked at his skin color and saw someone who didn't belong in first class. Eleanor Kensington thought her husband's money and her platinum status gave her the right to take seat 1A from anyone she pleased. She called security. She screamed insults. She demanded he be thrown off the plane. But she didn't know that the man she was abusing wasn't just a passenger. As the pilot stepped out of the cockpit, pale and shaking, Eleanor was about to learn a brutal lesson in humility. She hadn't just stolen a seat. She was trying to kick the owner off his own airplane. And the karma that followed would destroy her entire life. The air inside the first-class cabin of Royal Horizon Airlines Flight 882 from London Heathrow to New York's JFK always smelled the same, a mix of fresh orchids, expensive leather, and old money. It was a smell Eleanor Kensington felt she was born to breathe. She swept into the cabin 20 minutes before takeoff, her heels clicking aggressively against the floor of the Boeing 777. She was a woman who wore her wealth like armor. Her trench coat was Burberry. Her bag was a limited edition Hermes Birkin that cost more than most people's cars, and her expression was one of permanent dissatisfaction. She scanned the cabin. It was the ultra-premium Horizon Suite configuration. Only 8 seats, fully enclosed with sliding privacy doors. It was the pinnacle of commercial aviation luxury. Eleanor held boarding pass 1A in her hand. Or rather, she held a boarding pass that said 1B, but in Eleanor's mind, 1A was her seat. It was always her seat. It was the seat on the left, the captain's side, the seat of authority. When her husband, Richard Kensington, booked their flights, she specifically demanded 1A. The fact that the booking agent had told her it was unavailable/blocked was a detail she had chosen to ignore. "I'll sort it out on the plane," she had told Richard at the check-in counter. "They always keep it open for VIPs, and I am the VS of IPs." Richard, a weary-looking man in a gray suit who made his fortune in hedge funds but lost his soul in his marriage, just sighed. He took seat 2A, wisely distancing himself from the storm he knew was coming. Eleanor marched to the front. She stopped dead. Someone was already in seat 1A. The privacy door was open. Inside, a man was settled into the massive leather recliner. He was looking out the window, watching the rain streak across the glass of Heathrow's tarmac. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, scanning him instantly for status markers. She found none. He was a black man, perhaps in his late 30s. He had a strong jawline and a shaved head, but his attire was offensive to her sensibilities. He was wearing a dark gray, hooded sweatshirt, black joggers that looked like gym wear, and sneakers. He had large, noise-canceling headphones around his neck and was tapping away on an iPad. No suit, no Rolex visible, no sign of importance. To Eleanor, the calculation was simple. Affirmative action hire using employee benefits. Or a rapper. Or a lottery winner. Whoever he was ruining the aesthetic of her flight. She didn't wait for a flight attendant. She stepped right into the entrance of his suite and tapped her manicured nails loudly on the plastic shell of the seat. Clack! 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 The man didn't jump. He didn't even look startled. He simply stopped typing, took a slow breath, and turned his head to look at her. His eyes were dark, calm, and unsettlingly intelligent. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth and polite, with an accent that was hard to place. American, but polished. "You're in my seat," Eleanor said. She didn't ask. She stated it. She waved her boarding pass, keeping her thumb conveniently over the 1B printed on it, in his face. The man glanced at the paper, then back at her. "I believe that says 1B, ma'am. This is 1A. "I know what it says," Eleanor snapped, her voice rising just enough to attract the attention of the other 4 passengers settling in. "But there's been a mistake. My husband booked us this row. I always sit in 1A. You're obviously misplaced." She let the word misplaced hang in the air, dripping with implication. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I assure you, I am not misplaced. I booked this seat specifically." "Booked it?" Eleanor let out a short, cruel laugh. With what? Miles? Employee standby vouchers? Look, let's not make this difficult. I have a very important meeting in New York, and I need the window on this side to sleep. You can take 1B. It's the same seat. If it's the same seat, the man said, turning back to his iPad, then you shouldn't mind sitting in it. The dismissal was total. He put his headphones back over his ears. Eleanor felt the heat rise up her neck. She wasn't used to being ignored. She was used to waiters trembling and store managers opening closed doors. She reached out and physically pulled the headphones off his head. The cabin went silent. Even Richard, 2 rows back, winced and covered his eyes. The man slowly stood up. He was tall, well over 6 feet. He towered over her. The casual clothes couldn't hide the fact that he was physically imposing. He looked down at the headphones in her hand, then at her face. "Do not," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "touch me or my property again." "I'll touch whatever I want when it's in my space," Eleanor shrieked. "Stewardess! Stewardess!" A young flight attendant named Sarah, who had been prepping champagne in the galley, came rushing over. She looked terrified. She knew who Eleanor was. Eleanor was a known problem in the airline's internal database, flagged as high maintenance / do not upgrade. But Sarah also saw the man in 1A. Sarah's face went completely white when she looked at the man in the hoodie. "Mrs. Kensington," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, there is a massive problem." Eleanor pointed a jagged finger at the man. "This person is refusing to move from my seat. I want him moved. Now, put him in economy where he belongs, or just get him off the flight. He's aggressive. He just threatened me." The man stood silently, hands clasped behind his back, watching Sarah. He gave the flight attendant a barely perceptible nod, as if giving her permission to speak. "Mrs. Kensington," Sarah said, swallowing hard. "This gentleman is ticketed for seat 1A. He has the highest priority boarding status. I cannot move him." "Highest priority?" Eleanor scoffed. "Do you know who my husband is? Richard Kensington. Kensington Global. We spend $50,000 a year with this airline. This man is wearing a hoodie. Check his ticket again. I bet it's fake. I bet he sneaked in here while you were flirting with the pilots." "Ma'am, please," Sarah pleaded, glancing nervously at the man in the hoodie. "Please take your seat in 1B. We are due to push back in 10 minutes. "I am not sitting in the aisle." Eleanor slammed her Birkin bag down onto the side table of seat 1A, narrowly missing the man's iPad. "I am not moving until this thug is removed." The man in the hoodie sighed. He looked at Sarah. "Sarah, is it?" "Yes, sir," Sarah squeaked. "What is the protocol for a passenger who refuses to take their assigned seat and creates a disturbance prior to pushback?" Eleanor laughed. "Oh, listen to him," quoting the rulebook. "What are you, a paralegal?" Sarah straightened her back. "Sir, the protocol is to ask the passenger 3 times. If they refuse, we call the captain. If they still refuse, we call Port Authority." "Good," the man said. "Ask her 3 times." The tension in the cabin was thick enough to choke on. The other passengers in first class were no longer pretending to read their magazines. They were watching. A young tech entrepreneur in 3A had his phone out, subtly recording the interaction. Eleanor saw the phone but didn't care. In her mind, she was the victim. She was the hero standing up for standards. "You don't need to ask me 3 times, Eleanor spat at Sarah. "I am telling you, get the captain." "I want the captain here right now. I'm not dealing with a stewardess and a squatter." "Ma'am," Sarah said, trying to maintain her professional composure, though her lower lip was trembling. "This is your first warning. Please take seat 1B. "No." "Ma'am, this is your second warning. If you do not sit down, you will be in violation of federal aviation regulations." "Oh, screw your regulations." Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a heavy black metal credit card. She slammed it onto the console next to the man's hand. "Do you see this? American Express Centurion. The black card. There are maybe a few thousand people in the world who have one. It buys me whatever I want. Now take this card. Go upgrade this guy to, I don't know, the cockpit. Or just pay him off. Give him $500. That's probably a week's wages for him. The man in the hoodie looked down at the black card. He didn't touch it. He looked at Eleanor with a mixture of pity and amusement. "You think money is the issue here?" he asked quietly. "Money is always the issue for people like you," Eleanor sneered. "Come on, how much?" "How much to get out of my face?" $1,000? I have cash." She began digging into her purse again. "Mrs. Kensington," the man said, "my name is Marcus. I'm going to give you one chance to save yourself a lot of embarrassment. Pick up your bag, pick up your card, sit in 1B, and don't speak to me for the rest of the flight." "Don't you dare threaten me, Marcus," she mocked his name. "I don't care if your name is Barack Obama. You are in my seat." She turned to Sarah. "Get the captain, now, or I will have your job. I will call corporate and tell them you allowed an aggressive man to harass a platinum member." Sarah looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded once. "Get the captain, Sarah. It's okay." Sarah hurried away toward the cockpit. For a moment, it was just Eleanor and Marcus. "You're going to regret this," Eleanor hissed. "My husband knows the CEO of this airline. We were at a gala with him last year. I'm going to text him right now. You'll be blacklisted. You'll never fly Royal Horizon again." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You know the CEO?" "Personally," she lied. "We had dinner." "Interesting," Marcus said. "What's his name?" Eleanor froze. She racked her brain. She had expected him to back down, not fact-check her. "His name is Mr. Horizon. Charles Horizon." Marcus actually laughed. A deep, genuine chuckle. "Charles Horizon? That's who you had dinner with?" "Yes. And he won't be happy to hear that a hoodlum is harassing his best customers." "I'm sure he won't," Marcus said dryly. Just then, the cockpit door opened. Captain Miller emerged. He was a veteran pilot, gray-haired, with 4 stripes on his shoulders and a look of stern authority. He had flown for 30 years. He adjusted his cap and walked into the first-class cabin. Eleanor smiled triumphantly. "Finally, someone in charge." Captain Miller looked at the scene. He saw Eleanor standing aggressively. He saw the bag on the console. And then he looked at the man in the hoodie. The captain's eyes widened. He stopped mid-step. His posture changed immediately from authoritative to deferential. "Captain!" Eleanor barked. "Thank God! This man has stolen my seat. He refused to move. He's been threatening me. I want him arrested. I want him off this plane immediately." Captain Miller ignored Eleanor completely. He walked straight past her and stood in front of the seated man. "Good evening, sir," the captain said, his voice respectful, almost nervous. "I wasn't informed you were joining us on this leg until just now. My apologies for the disturbance." Eleanor's jaw dropped. "Excuse me, why are you apologizing to him? He's the one causing the disturbance." Captain Miller turned to Eleanor slowly. His face was hard. "Ma'am, I need you to step back." "I will not step back. I am Eleanor Kensington. I demand you check his ticket." "I don't need to check his ticket," the captain said. "Why? Because you're afraid of being called a racist," Eleanor screamed. "This is reverse discrimination. If I were black and he were white, you'd have tasered him by now. This is unbelievable. I am not flying with this man. Either he goes, or I make one phone call and shut this whole flight down." She grabbed her phone. "I'm calling the police. I'm saying there's a threat on board." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted from awkward to dangerous. Making a threat about safety on a plane was a felony. Marcus stood up again. He looked at the captain. "Captain Miller, is it?" "Yes, Mr. Thorne," the captain replied. "Mr. Thorne. The name didn't register with Eleanor yet. She was too busy dialing 911. "She's threatening to report a false threat," Marcus said calmly. "That triggers a mandatory evacuation and a bomb squad sweep. It will delay this flight by 4 hours and cost the airline roughly $200,000 in fuel, fines, and missed slots." "Yes, sir," the captain said. "I don't want the other passengers to suffer because of her," Marcus said. He looked at Eleanor. "Put the phone down, Mrs. Kensington." "Shut up!" she screamed. "Hello, police? I'm at JFK, flight 882. There is a man on board. He's violent. I think he has a weapon. He's refusing to let the pilot fly." The cabin went deadly silent. The tech entrepreneur in 3A gasped. "Lady, you are crazy," he whispered. Eleanor hung up and smirked at Marcus. "There! Now the police are coming. Now you'll be sorry." Marcus looked at her with a profound sadness. "Mrs. Kensington, you just committed a federal crime. I tried to give you an out." "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she spat. Marcus reached into the pocket of his hoodie. Eleanor flinched. "He's got a gun!" she shrieked. But Marcus didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a simple, sleek phone. He dialed a number and put it to his ear. "Yes, send them in," Marcus said into the phone. "And get legal on the line. We have a code red in the first-class cabin. Yes, immediate removal." He hung up and looked at the captain. "Captain Miller, I'm sorry, but we're going to miss our slot. Please inform the tower that we are returning to the gate to offload a disruptive passenger." "Who do you think you are?" Eleanor laughed, though her voice was starting to crack. "You can't order the plane to turn around. You're nobody." Marcus took a step closer to her. The lighting in the cabin seemed to catch the sharp angles of his face. The thug demeanor she had projected onto him vanished, replaced by an aura of absolute, terrifying power. "You asked earlier if I knew the CEO, Charles Horizon," Marcus said softly. "You said you had dinner with him." "I did," she lied, doubling down. "That's strange," Marcus said. "Because there is no Charles Horizon. Royal Horizon Airlines was founded 10 years ago." He paused for effect. "It was founded by me. My name is Marcus Thorne." Eleanor blinked. "So, you work for the airline?" "No, Eleanor," Marcus said, his voice ringing clear through the silent cabin. "I don't work for the airline. I am the airline." The silence that followed was heavy, louder than the roar of the jet engines spooling down outside. Eleanor froze. Her brain tried to process the information, but her ego refused to let it in. Marcus Thorne. The name sounded vaguely familiar. She had seen it in the Wall Street Journal, usually associated with hostile takeovers and aviation innovation. But the pictures were always of a man in a bespoke suit, usually smiling from a podium, not a man in a hoodie. "You're lying," she whispered, but the doubt was creeping into her eyes. "Captain Miller," Marcus said, not looking away from Eleanor. "Who signs your paycheck?" Captain Miller straightened up, his chest swelling with pride. "You do, Mr. Thorne. It's an honor to have you on board, sir. I've read your memo on the new pension plans. Very generous." "Thank you, Captain," Marcus said. "And who owns the aircraft we are standing in?" "Specifically, this Boeing 777-300ER, tail number N882RH. This aircraft is the property of Thorne Aviation Group, a subsidiary of Thorne Holdings, of which you are the sole proprietor, sir." Marcus turned back to Eleanor. She looked like she was going to vomit. Her hand, still clutching the black card, was trembling violently. "You own the plane?" she stammered. "I own the plane," Marcus confirmed. "I own the gate we are parked at. I own the lounge you drank champagne in earlier. And frankly, Mrs. Kensington, I own the seat you are trying to steal." Eleanor looked around for help. She looked at Richard, her husband. Richard Kensington was currently trying to melt into seat 2A. He had his hands over his face, shaking his head. He knew. He had recognized Marcus Thorne about 2 minutes ago, but was too terrified to intervene. "Richard!" Eleanor shrieked. "Do something. Tell him who we are." Richard slowly lowered his hands. He looked at Marcus with the eyes of a condemned man. "Mr. Thorne," Richard said, his voice weak. "I am so sorry. I tried to tell her." "You know who I am?" Marcus asked Richard. "Yes, sir," Richard said. "My firm, Kensington Global. We're actually trying to bid on the underwriting for your new Asian expansion routes next week." "Oh," Marcus said. A cold smile touched his lips. "The underwriting bid? That's a massive contract. Worth about, what, $12 million in fees?" $14 million, Richard whispered, looking like he wanted to die. "Well," Marcus said, brushing a piece of lint off his hoodie, "I think we can go ahead and cancel that meeting, don't you? I generally don't do business with people who think I'm a thug because of my zip code or my skin color." "No, please," Richard begged, standing up now. "Please, Mr. Thorne. She's not well. She's under stress." "I am not under stress," Eleanor yelled, unable to stop herself. Her narcissism was fighting a losing battle with reality. "I am a platinum member. You can't just treat me like this." "I don't care if you own the plane. I have rights. I paid for a ticket." "And you violated the contract of carriage," Marcus said. "Specifically, Section 4, Paragraph 2, abuse of crew or passengers. And Section 9, endangering the safety of the flight by making false reports to law enforcement." Sirens began to wail outside the aircraft. Blue and red lights flashed against the rain-slicked windows. "You called the police, Eleanor," Marcus said. "You wanted the authorities? You got them." The main cabin door thumped. The jet bridge alarm sounded. 3 officers from the Port Authority Police Department stormed onto the plane. They were followed by 2 men in dark suits. Marcus's personal security detail, who had been seated in economy, as per Marcus's humble leadership policy, but had sprinted forward the moment he made the call. "Where is the disturbance?" the lead officer asked, hand on his holster. Eleanor pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. "Him. He threatened me. He has a weapon." The officer looked at Marcus. He recognized him instantly. Everyone at the airport knew Marcus Thorne. He was the man who had funded the new police benevolence hall. "Mr. Thorne?" the officer asked, confused. "Sir?" "Officer," Marcus said calmly. "This woman, Mrs. Kensington, has assaulted a passenger, me, by physically removing my property. She has verbally abused the flight crew. She has refused lawful orders from the captain. And she just dialed 911 and reported a false weapon threat on a commercial airliner." The officer's face hardened. He turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am, is that true?" "He's lying!" Eleanor cried, but the fight was leaving her. She saw the cell phones of the other passengers raised, recording everything. She saw her husband weeping into his hands. She saw the pilot looking at her with contempt. "We have witnesses," Marcus said, "the entire cabin, and Captain Miller." "Take her off," the captain said. "I want her off my manifest, permanently." The officer stepped forward and pulled out a pair of zip-tie handcuffs. "Eleanor Kensington, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." "You can't arrest me," she screamed as the officer grabbed her wrist. "I'm rich! My husband is Richard Kensington!" "Richard!" she screamed, looking back as they spun her around. Richard didn't move. He didn't even look up. "Goodbye, Eleanor," he whispered. "You're hurting me." "My Birkin. Get my Birkin." "Sarah," Marcus said softly, "please bring her bag." Sarah, feeling a surge of vindication she had never felt in her life, picked up the $40,000 bag. She walked over to the officers. As they dragged Eleanor down the aisle, she kicked and screamed, her Chanel heels scuffing the floor. "I'll sue you! I'll sue this whole airline!" "You'll hear from my lawyers." Marcus stepped out into the aisle. He watched her go. "You can certainly try to sue," Marcus called out, his voice calm but carrying effortlessly. "But you'll find it hard to find a lawyer, because I own the firm that represents most of them, too." Eleanor's screams faded as she was hauled into the jet bridge. The silence returned to the cabin. It was deafening. Marcus turned to the rest of the passengers. He looked at the tech guy, the older couple in row 4, and finally, Richard Kensington. "My apologies for the delay, everyone," Marcus said. "We'll be underway shortly. Drinks are on the house. For the whole plane, not just first class." He sat back down in seat 1A. But for Richard Kensington, the nightmare was just beginning. As the cabin door hissed shut, sealing the outside world away, the atmosphere inside Flight 882 shifted from chaotic to oppressively heavy. The air conditioning hummed, but it did little to cool the burning shame radiating from seat 2A. Richard Kensington sat in the wreckage of his social standing. He stared at the back of seat 1A, the seat his wife had tried to commandeer. The privacy divider was up now. Marcus Thorne had retreated into his own world, presumably to work on the billion-dollar empire Eleanor had just mocked. Richard's hands were shaking as he reached for his scotch. He looked around. The other passengers were avoiding eye contact with him, treating him like he was contagious. The tech entrepreneur in 3A, a young man named Jason Miller, was furiously typing on his phone. Richard knew exactly what Jason was doing. He was telling the world. 20 minutes after takeoff, the seatbelt sign pinged off. Richard couldn't take it anymore. The silence was louder than the screaming had been. He unbuckled his seatbelt. He needed to apologize. He needed to salvage something, anything, from this disaster. He walked slowly to seat 1A. He knocked gently on the privacy shell. The divider slid down electronically. Marcus Thorne looked up from his iPad. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked tired. "Mr. Thorne," Richard stammered, "I just wanted to say." "Sit down, Richard," Marcus said, gesturing to the ottoman opposite his seat. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Richard sat. He felt like a schoolboy in the principal's office, despite being 10 years older than Marcus. "I am mortified," Richard began, his voice cracking. "Eleanor, she has issues. She grew up with money. She's never heard the word, no, in 40 years. I should have stopped her sooner." Marcus took off his reading glasses and set them on the wood-grain table. "That's the problem, Richard. You didn't stop her. You watched. You let her abuse a flight attendant who makes $40,000 a year. You let her scream at a pilot. You let her racially profile me. You only stepped in when you realized your bank account was in danger." The words hit Richard like physical blows. "I was scared of her. You don't live with her, Marcus. She's relentless. She destroys everything she touches." "And yet you enable her," Marcus said coldly. "You pay the bills. You buy the first-class tickets. You hand her the black card. You are the battery that powers her entitlement." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Do you know why I wear a hoodie when I fly, Richard?" Richard shook his head. "Because I need to know how my company treats people who don't look like billionaires. If I walked in here in a 3-piece suit, Sarah would have been nervous, but she would have known I was a VIP. I dress like this to see if my staff treats a man in a hoodie with the same respect as a man in a tuxedo. And today, Sarah passed that test. She treated me with dignity even before she knew who I was." Marcus paused. "But your wife? She failed the test of being a human being." "I know," Richard whispered. "I'm going to lose the contract, aren't I? The Asian expansion underwriting." Marcus picked up his glass of sparkling water. "Richard, you didn't just lose the contract. I've already sent an email to my chief legal officer. We are reviewing every asset Kensington Global manages for Thorne Holdings. We have about $300 million in your funds. By the time we land in New York, that money will be moved." Richard went pale. "Marcus, that will bankrupt the firm. If Thorne Holdings pulls out, the other investors will panic. It's a run on the bank. You're destroying my life because of her." "No," Marcus corrected him. "I am protecting my assets. How can I trust a man to manage my money when he can't even manage his own wife? If you can't stand up to Eleanor in a plane, how can you stand up to a market crash? You are weak, Richard, and the market eats weak men." Richard slumped. Tears streamed down his face. "I'm going to lose everything." "Then maybe," Marcus said, his voice softening just a fraction, "you'll finally be free." Marcus put his headphones back on. The conversation was over. Richard stumbled back to his seat. He opened his laptop, desperate to check his email, to warn his partners. He connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. The first thing that popped up wasn't his email. It was his Twitter feed. Trending #1 worldwide. Seat 1. A trending #2 worldwide, Karen on a plane. Trending #3 worldwide, Marcus Thorne. Richard clicked the top link. It was a video. It was shaky, filmed from seat 3A. It showed Eleanor screaming, "I am the Vest of IPs." It showed her grabbing the headphones. It showed her screeching, "I own this airline," followed by Marcus's calm, deadly reveal, "I am the airline." The video had been up for 40 minutes. It had 12 million views. The comments were brutal. Imagine being this entitled and getting owned by the billionaire CEO. Her husband is sitting right there doing nothing. What a coward. Boycott Kensington Global. Trash people. Richard shut his laptop. He couldn't breathe. He looked out the window at the dark Atlantic Ocean below. He was trapped in a metal tube for another 5 hours, hurtling toward a life that no longer existed. New York's JFK Airport is usually a place of anonymity, where millions of people pass through like ghosts. But when Flight 882 touched down at 9:45 p.m., anonymity was impossible. As the plane taxied to the gate, the captain came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. We ask that everyone remain seated with seat belts fastened. We have been asked by Port Authority to hold the aircraft on the tarmac for a moment." Richard looked out the window. It wasn't just Port Authority. The tarmac was swarming. There were police cruisers, airport security, SUVs. And beyond the fence line, Richard could see the blinding lights of news vans. CNN, Fox News, NBC, they were all there. The story was too perfect. The billionaire black CEO, the racist socialite, the viral video. It was the perfect storm of modern media. The cabin door opened. 2 federal agents boarded the plane. They weren't looking for Marcus. They walked straight to seat 2A. "Richard Kensington?" one agent asked. "Yes," Richard whispered. "We need you to come with us, sir. For your own protection. The terminal is unsafe." Richard grabbed his bag. He walked past Marcus, who was calmly gathering his things. Marcus didn't look at him. As Richard was escorted off the plane, he didn't go to the VIP lounge. He was taken to a side exit. But the paparazzi have long lenses. As he stepped onto the jet bridge stairs, the flashes erupted like lightning. "Richard, did you know she was a racist? Richard, is the company going under? Richard, are you going to divorce her?" He was shoved into a waiting black SUV. He pulled out his phone. He had 412 missed calls. His partners, his clients, his mother. He listened to one voicemail from his managing partner, David. "Richard, don't bother coming in tomorrow. The board is meeting at 8 a.m. We're invoking the morality clause in your partnership agreement. You're out. And Richard, you better have a damn good lawyer, because the investors are already talking about lawsuits." Meanwhile, across the city, Eleanor Kensington was experiencing a very different kind of hospitality. She was currently in a holding cell at the Queen's Central Booking Facility. They had taken her straight from the airport in London, coordinated with NY authorities for immediate arraignment upon arrival, since the crime happened on a U.S.-flagged carrier, U.S. jurisdiction applied. She was still wearing her Burberry trench coat, but it was wrinkled and stained with coffee she had spilled during her tantrum. Her Birkin bag had been confiscated and tagged as evidence. She was pacing the small concrete cell, screaming at the guard. "I demand my phone call. I am Eleanor Kensington. Do you know who my husband is?" The guard, a heavy-set woman who had seen it all, didn't even look up from her crossword puzzle. "Lady, your husband isn't picking up. We called him. He sent it to voicemail." Eleanor froze. "That's a lie. Richard would never ignore me." "Maybe he's busy watching the video," the guard chuckled. "My daughter sent it to me. You're famous, honey. They're making memes of you." "Memes?" Eleanor blinked. "Yeah. There's one of you looking like a screeching banshee with the caption, 'When you try to speak to the manager, but he is the manager.'" Eleanor slumped onto the metal bench. "I need a lawyer. Call Heavy Hitters. Call Bratton and Hughes. They represent my husband's firm." "We called them too," the guard said, turning the page of her puzzle. "They said they have a conflict of interest. Apparently, they represent Thorne Aviation too. And since Mr. Thorne is the victim, they can't help you," they said to try a public defender. A public defender. Eleanor felt the bile rise in her throat. She, Eleanor Kensington, using a lawyer meant for poor people? "This isn't real," she whispered, rocking back and forth. "This is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up in 1A, and that man will be gone." But the cold steel of the bench was very, very real. 3 days later. The headquarters of Kensington Global was a glass monolith in Manhattan. Usually, it was a place of quiet power. Today, it was under siege. Protesters stood outside with signs that read, "Eat the rich," and "Racism has no seat here." Richard Kensington entered through the underground garage. He hadn't slept in 72 hours. He looked 10 years older. He wore a suit, but his tie was loose and his eyes were bloodshot. He walked into the boardroom. The long mahogany table was full. His 3 partners sat at the far end. They looked like executioners. "Sit down, Richard," David said. Richard sat. "Look, I know it's bad, but we can spin this. Eleanor is seeking treatment. We can say it was a medication reaction, ambient psychosis." "It's too late for spin, Richard," David said, sliding a thick document across the table. "Thorne Holdings pulled their $300 million yesterday morning. By noon, the Teachers' Pension Fund pulled their $100 million. By 4 p.m., we lost the Saudi account." David paused. "We have lost 60% of our assets under management in 48 hours. We are toxic. No one wants to give money to the guy whose wife calls billionaires thugs." "I can fix it," Richard pleaded. "I'll talk to Marcus. He's a reasonable man." "He is reasonable," David agreed. "That's why he made us an offer." "An offer?" "Thorne Capital is willing to buy out Kensington Global. They want our infrastructure, our analysts, and our remaining lower-tier accounts." Richard felt a glimmer of hope. "Okay, that's good. A buyout. We can exit with some dignity." "They are buying us for pennies on the dollar, Richard. It's a hostility acquisition in everything but name. But we have to take it. It's the only way to avoid bankruptcy." David leaned in. "But there is a condition. A specific clause Marcus Thorne inserted personally." Richard swallowed hard. "What is it?" "The Richard Kensington removal clause. The buyout only goes through if you are terminated immediately, with no severance and stripped of all equity." The room spun. "No severance? I built this firm! I have equity worth $20 million. "Not anymore," David said coldly. "Your equity is worth 0 because the company is worth nothing without this bailout. And frankly, Richard, we're happy to do it. You brought this plague into our house." "But I have mortgages," Richard whispered. "I have the Hamptons house. Eleanor's credit card bills." "Sell the house," David said, standing up. "As for Eleanor's bills, that's not our problem. Security is waiting to escort you out." Richard walked out of the building he had built, carrying a cardboard box with a stapler and a picture frame. He walked out onto the street, dazed. His phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the St. Regis, room 404. Now." Richard didn't know why, but he hailed a cab. When he got to room 404, the door was ajar. He pushed it open. Sitting in an armchair by the window, drinking tea, was Marcus Thorne. He wasn't wearing a hoodie today. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Richard's car. "You wanted to see me?" Richard asked, his voice hollow. "I wanted to give you a choice," Marcus said. "I just bought your company. I know they fired you. I know you're broke." "You ruined me," Richard said, but there was no fire in his voice, just defeat. "I accelerated the inevitable," Marcus corrected. "But I'm not a monster, Richard. I believe in redemption, just not for everyone." Marcus placed a folder on the table. "Inside this folder is a consulting contract. It pays $200,000 a year. It's a fraction of what you used to make, but it's enough to live. Enough to start over." Richard stared at the folder. It was a lifeline, a way to survive. "What's the catch?" Richard asked. "The catch," Marcus said, "is that you have to testify." "Testify?" "At Eleanor's trial next week. She's pleading not guilty. She's claiming I provoked her. She's claiming emotional distress. Her lawyers are going to drag this out, try to smear my name, try to smear the airline." Marcus looked Richard in the eye. "I need you to take the stand and tell the truth. Tell the jury about her history. Tell them she wasn't on Ambien. Tell them she's a bigot who has done this before to waiters, valets, and store clerks. I need you to destroy her defense." Richard trembled. "She's my wife, Marcus." "She is an anchor around your neck," Marcus said. "She cost you your job, your reputation, and your dignity. Cut the rope, Richard. Save yourself." Richard looked at the contract. Then he looked at Marcus. "Where do I sign?" The trial of the people of New York versus Eleanor Kensington did not just capture the city's attention, it held it hostage. By the morning of the verdict, the steps of the Southern District Court in Manhattan looked less like a legal institution and more like a red carpet premiere for a disaster movie. Satellite trucks from every major network idled on the street, their exhaust mixing with the crisp autumn air. Protesters stood behind police barricades, holding signs that read, "Entitlement is not a defense," and "Justice for Seat 1A." Inside the courtroom, the air was stale and thick with tension. Eleanor Kensington sat at the defense table, a shadow of the woman who had terrorized Flight 882. Her legal team had dressed her in a soft, heather gray cardigan and minimal makeup, a calculated attempt to present her as a fragile, misunderstood victim of circumstance. But her eyes told a different story. They darted around the room, manic and hard, looking for someone to blame. She wasn't looking at the jury. She was looking at the back of the courtroom. Where Marcus Thorne sat, Marcus was unmoving. He wore a charcoal suit, sitting quietly in the gallery, his presence commanding the room without him uttering a word. He wasn't there to gloat. He was there to witness. The prosecution rested their case on a mountain of evidence: the viral video, the flight logs, the testimony of Captain Miller, and the tearful account of Sarah, the flight attendant. But the defense's strategy was aggressive. They claimed Eleanor was suffering from a rare reaction to sleeping pills, that she was disoriented, and that Marcus Thorne had used his power to entrap a confused woman. It was a flimsy lie, but it was the only shield she had left. Then, the prosecution called their final rebuttal witness. The people call Richard Kensington to the stand. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Eleanor's head snapped toward the witness box. She hadn't seen Richard since the day the police dragged her off the plane. She expected him to be broken, to be begging for her forgiveness. Instead, Richard walked in with a strange, new posture. He looked tired, yes, and he had lost weight, but his spine was straight. He took the oath, his voice steady. "Mr. Kensington," the district attorney began, pacing slowly in front of the jury box. "You were seated in 2A, directly behind your wife during the incident. The defense claims your wife was in a drug-induced haze, that she didn't know what she was doing. Is that true?" Richard looked at the jury. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old wood and floor polish. "No, that is a lie." Eleanor's defense attorney, a sharp-featured man named Mr. Sterling, shot up. "Objection! The witness is not a medical expert." "Overruled," Justice Holloway said, peering over her spectacles. "The witness is testifying to his observations. Continue, Mr. Kensington." Richard turned to look directly at Eleanor. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't fear her gaze. "Eleanor hadn't taken any pills," Richard said, his voice ringing clear in the silence. "She was drinking champagne in the lounge 20 minutes prior. She was perfectly lucid. She attacked Mr. Thorne, not because she was confused, but because she was angry. She was angry that a man who looked like him, wearing a hoodie, with his skin color, dared to sit in a seat she believed belonged to her by divine right." "You're lying," Eleanor hissed from her table. Mr. Sterling grabbed her arm to silence her, but she shook him off. "Mr. Kensington," the DA continued, ignoring the outburst, "why are you testifying today? Isn't it true that Mr. Thorne's company acquired your firm? Aren't you just doing this to save your own skin?" This was the trap. But Richard was ready. "I lost my firm," Richard said softly. "I lost my equity. I lost my reputation. I am currently living in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. I have nothing left to lose. I am testifying because for 10 years, I enabled that woman. I paid off the waiters she screamed at. I apologized to the store clerks she abused. I let her rot from the inside out because it was easier than standing up to her. But when I saw her treat a human being, Mr. Thorne, like he was garbage, I realized I was just as guilty as she was. I am here to stop the cycle." The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter paused. Eleanor couldn't take it. The narrative, her narrative of being the victim, was shattering. "Shut up!" she screamed, leaping to her feet. The chair clattered backward behind her. "You spineless coward! I made you. You were a nobody until I married you. And you!" She pointed a trembling finger at the back of the room at Marcus. "You tricked me. You sat there like a thug just to humiliate me. It's my plane. My husband pays for this whole airline." "Sit down, Mrs. Kensington." Justice Holloway barked, banging the gavel so hard the wood echoed like a gunshot. "I will not sit down," Eleanor shrieked, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. I am Eleanor Kensington. Do you know who my family is? This trial is a farce. I demand a mistrial. I demand that man be arrested." Marshals moved in, hands on their holsters. The jury watched, wide-eyed. They weren't seeing a medicated victim. They were seeing the raw, ugly truth that Richard had just described. She had convicted herself in 10 seconds flat. The jury deliberated for less than 45 minutes. When they returned, they didn't look at Eleanor. We, the jury, find the defendant, Eleanor Kensington, guilty on all counts. Justice Holloway didn't wait for a sentencing hearing. She had seen enough. She looked down at Eleanor, who was now slumped in her chair, weeping. Not tears of remorse, but the angry, hot tears of a child who had finally been told no. "Mrs. Kensington," the judge began, her voice cold and heavy. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a profound lack of humility. You utilized emergency police resources as a weapon because you were inconvenienced. You degraded a fellow citizen based on bias and arrogance. You view the world as something that serves you, and people as obstacles to be removed." The judge leaned forward. "It is time for you to learn that the rules apply to you too. I sentence you to 24 months in a federal correctional facility. Furthermore, given your willingness to endanger the safety of a flight crew, you are hereby placed on the federal no-fly list for the remainder of your life. You will never step foot on an aircraft in the United States again." Eleanor let out a guttural wail as the bailiffs moved in. The sound was raw and pitiful. "Richard! Richard, help me!" She looked back, but the space where Richard had been sitting was empty. He had already walked out the door. 6 months later, the autumn wind whipped through the streets of Queens, New York. Richard Kensington sat on the fire escape of his small apartment, holding a mug of cheap coffee. Inside, his apartment was sparse. IKEA furniture, a small TV, a stack of books. It was a far cry from the penthouse on Park Avenue. But he was smiling. He picked up the local newspaper. On page 4, there was a small feature. Local nonprofit, Second Chance, helps minority entrepreneurs secure microloans. The photo showed Richard, sleeves rolled up, shaking hands with a young bakery owner in the Bronx. He wasn't making millions anymore. He was making a living. And for the first time, he slept through the night. He turned the page. A smaller blurb in the crime and courts section caught his eye. Appeal denied for air rage socialite. Eleanor Kensington transferred to Danbury Federal Correctional Institution to serve remaining 22 months. Richard folded the paper. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel sadness. He just felt light. The weight was gone. Thousands of miles away, at 35,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, the cabin of Royal Horizon Flight 102 was dim and quiet. Marcus Thorne sat in seat 1A. He was dressed in his usual comfort wear, a gray hoodie and sweatpants. He had a glass of sparkling water on the console and a report on renewable aviation fuel on his lap. The flight attendant, a young man this time, approached quietly. "Mr. Thorne, can I get you anything else?" Marcus looked up. "No, thank you, James. I'm good." "Sir," James hesitated. "I just wanted to say I saw the news about the trial, about Mrs. Kensington." Marcus closed his folder. "Yes?" "Thank you, sir," James said, "for standing up for Sarah, and for all of us. Usually guys like us, we just have to take it. It felt good to see the good guys win for once." Marcus smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "James, never just take it. Dignity is the one thing that isn't for sale on this airline." James nodded and retreated to the galley. Marcus turned to the window. The stars were bright above the clouds, an endless ocean of peace. He thought about Eleanor, sitting in a concrete cell, grounded forever. He thought about Richard, finding his humanity in a walk-up in Queens. Karma hadn't just hit back. It had rebalanced the scales. Marcus reclined his seat. He closed his eyes, the gentle hum of the engines lulling him towards sleep, safe in the knowledge that at this altitude there was no room for prejudice, only the open sky. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the brutal, beautiful conclusion of Eleanor Kensington. She spent her life thinking she was above the law, only to find herself grounded for life. The irony is poetic. She fought for a seat she didn't own and lost the ability to ever fly again. But the real hero of this ending might be Richard. He lost his fortune, but he broke the cycle of abuse. It proves that it's never too late to do the right thing, even if it costs you everything you thought you valued. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think 24 months in prison was enough? Or should the judge have given her more time for the fake 911 call? Let's debate it below. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It helps us beat the algorithm. And make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have a story coming next week about a gold digger who tried to scam a lottery winner, only to realize he was an undercover FBI agent. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.